So my name's Tara Yarrow-Gulatee. I work for JP Morgan in Paris. I've spent most of my career at JP Morgan in technology, and my connection to Aberdeen University is that I actually studied medical physics there quite a long time ago. Loved every minute of it and loved being in Aberdeen.
Yeah, very interesting. And could you please tell us a little bit more about your educational background and why did you decide to do your master's specifically in Aberdeen?
I studied chemistry because that was my favourite subject at school, or one of my favourite subjects, and I wanted to study something scientific.
Hmm.
And chemistry was interested me more than physics or maths or something. So I went off and did chemistry, but I actually did philosophy at the same time.
Hmm.
Life was a bit easier in those days. We didn't have to pay heavy student fees like you guys do now. So I
Hmm.
could do two degrees, and I wanted to study philosophy mainly because it was at the London School of Economics,
Yeah.
and I thought that would be a hotbed of wild, radical student activity. It
Hmm.
wasn't actually. I was about 10 years too late for that, but I thought it would be. And I thought that would upset my parents because I'd been a model schoolgirl and I wanted to be a rebel student. So that didn't quite work out, but it was a very interesting combination, chemistry and philosophy. And then after I'd graduated with my bachelor's, I didn't really know what to do next. And there was a lot of pressure, or a lot of people were talking about technology. It was the new sort of up and coming subject. There was a scientist as a prime minister in the UK, and she had many advantages and disadvantages to that prime minister, but she did feel that it was important that the nation upped its technology skills and that
Hmm.
young people increased their technology skills. So she set up a scheme of scholarships to
Hmm.
go and do transitions from an engineering or a technology degree to, an engineering or a scientific degree to a chemistry, to a scientific based technology degree.
Hmm.
And I thought that would be a good thing to do, but those courses were all so tedious and so boring and all about servers and networks and very complicated stuff until I saw the one at Aberdeen University,
Hmm.
and that was technology in medicine, medical physics, and that looked absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So I thought that's great, and I applied for it, and I was very happy to get taken on to the course. It was great.
Yes. Thank you so much. And what are some of your favorite memories from Aberdeen? Maybe from like social life of it.
I think I ate my first haggis in Aberdeen, and it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was actually quite tasty, and I've eaten it since. I did a Burns night there, which was
Hmm.
amazing. Um, I remember doing a tour of the whiskey distilleries with a
Hmm.
friend who was quite small, and they opened the vat and they asked her if she'd like to sort of smell it, and she had to stand on a little step to do that, and it was so strong she nearly passed out and fell in the whiskey vat. But no, it was a great year and I loved it.
Thank you. And you work for JP Morgan for over 20 years now. And what have been some key milestones in your career journey?
Um, Gosh, key milestones. So I don't know. There's a paper, a poster which somebody once shared with me, which said, "When things aren't going right, turn
Mhm.
left." And I feel that I've turned left quite a few times at JP Morgan. So I guess the first milestone was when I started, because I applied for the graduate trainee program in the UK,
Mhm.
and they took me, but not for the graduate trainee program in the UK. They gave me a one-way ticket to Frankfurt.
Yeah.
So that was a start. And then I worked in Frankfurt for a couple of years. I learned to code. I learned because I hadn't really,
Mhm.
I'd avoided technology until that point, but I learned to code. And after a couple of years, I was pretty good, and there was a big project automating something called money transfer. And the head of department wanted somebody from the UK to come over and run that program, and the UK wouldn't send the person he wanted.
Yeah.
So he gave me the opportunity, and I was far too junior, far too inexperienced. I got no project management skills, no people management skills, and all of a sudden I was doing both. So that was a huge opportunity for me and a huge step up. And I got a lot wrong, but I learned so much about project leadership and management that changed the course of my career. Um, Shortly after that, the team in Tokyo, the head of the money transfer business in Tokyo asked the head of the money transfer business in Frankfurt, would he go over and help reorganize the department? And the German guy said no, because he was absolutely terrified of flying. He had a real fear of flying. And they asked him if his number two could go. And he said, I know a woman who'd be better than that. She's just designed a technology system for me. Nobody knows my business better than she does. So that got me on a plane to Tokyo for 6 months. So that was all quite good. And then when I came back, I wanted to do something a bit more interesting and a bit more exciting or just different. And I mentioned that to several people and several managers. And 3 months later, I found myself out of technology, which was great, and into what's called the mid-office in a bank. And I ended up running 3 mid-office teams. So that was really great. And I had to learn an awful lot very, very fast. It was quite stressful running 3 teams. The teams were predominantly female. And I felt I was forever sorting out problems in people's personal lives, who got dumped by her boyfriend, who didn't want to sit next to somebody else. It was really quite stressful in that sense. Maybe I didn't distance myself properly. So I got headhunted by another bank. And I thought, yeah, new start. So I resigned and said I was going to go and work for that bank. And my manager at JP Morgan said, well, we don't want you to go. So how would you like a different, and we understand you're fed up with people. How would you like a different project where you represent Europe in a global project? So I was representing Europe and there were 12 colleagues in the US representing the US.
Yeah.
And a year later, there was still me in Europe and then there were 60 colleagues in the US. So I was beginning to feel a bit outnumbered. And I thought it was time for a change of direction. So then there was probably the most major milestone in my life, let alone my career, and I stopped work and my daughter arrived. So that was 3 years of paternity, maternity, 3 years of parental leave, and then back to JP Morgan in 1999 just to do the year 2000 project, which the biggest non-project in the world, because everybody thought that technology was going to stop on the 1st of January year 2000. We all worked terribly hard. And of course, it all carried on. There was no problems. So then I had to find something else to do. And I was in London and I bumped into somebody smoking a cigarette in a cafe, somebody I knew from JP Morgan. And he said, how would you like to go and work in Paris? And I had a very romantic, exciting image of Paris. So without asking what the job was, I said, yeah, absolutely, sure, take me to Paris. So I moved to Paris, and that was great, but it meant going back to technology. So I ran a technology team in Paris. And then again, a few years later, I happened to be chatting to somebody in the canteen in Paris, and we started talking about the Middle East and the fact that I love to travel. And he said, how would you like to go out to Saudi Arabia with me?
Wow.
So I went out to Saudi Arabia with him, and that was amazing. That was at a time when women couldn't work, women couldn't drive. Saudi Arabia was still very, very restrictive to women. And there I was out there with my abaya and my headscarf.
Wow.
And I didn't live out there, but I traveled out there a lot for work. So yeah, I think they're pretty major milestones.
That's very impressive. Very interesting to listen to that. And so what are some biggest changes you witnessed in IT and banking specifically during your time in finance?
Gosh, I mean, I've been around so long, it's difficult to say, but certainly when I started out programming in Frankfurt, we had a data center in Frankfurt, we had technology was all based in Frankfurt. And now very few locations have got data centers, everything's centralized. We're even moving stuff out of our data centers and onto cloud. So big changes in infrastructure. And I think one of the things which is very significant now is how fast change happens. how fast something becomes new and fashionable and then obsolete. And I remember the first Blackberries. I don't know if you're old enough to know what a Blackberry is, probably too young, but I remember when the first Blackberries arrived, they were only for senior bankers. We thought it was absolutely amazing that they could read their emails off their Blackberry in the evening. And they went from only being available to senior bankers to being available to everybody at work. And then all of a sudden, my kids wanted Blackberries because they could then chat on BlackBerry Messenger and it was much better than SMS. And then shortly after that, they were obsolete because we all had smartphones where we had applications and WhatsApp and FaceTime. And that was just an incredibly fast turnover of technology.
Wow, that's very interesting. And in your very, very impressive career, what was the proudest moment for you?
Well, you've probably got the feeling now that I'm not terribly keen on technology. So
Hmm.
I can't say that my proudest moment was a particular project that I delivered, but I am super proud of all the people I've hired. And I've hired lots of people. I hired a Finnish lady who sold jeans in a shop in Frankfurt and ended up becoming a managing director.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm very proud of all the young people I've hired who've gone on to do amazing things in the company.
That's great. And the next question is, how do you see all these emerging technologies like AI changing the financial services industry?
Um, I think we are just on the edge of a major change, probably a change as dramatic, I don't know, as the combustion engine and the industrial revolution, because it really does offer very fundamental changes in the work we do, repetitive tasks disappearing, the opportunities for much more tailored tailored services for our clients. Yeah, I think that it's going to offer up huge opportunities.
Hmm. And so, what would be your advice for for students who are looking to break into IT in financial services? What would you
It's a
recommend?
pretty boring subject, so make sure you have something interesting to do in your spare time.
Hmm.
But if you are going to break into IT because you are, don't do it unless you're passionate about something, either technology or financial services. And if you are, then make sure you have a good grasp of the technology which is in use now and an idea of where the technology is going.
Hmm.
And never stop learning. Just because you know how Azure LLM suite works today doesn't mean that in 2 or 3 years it'll still be in use. So never ever stop learning. Build a network. Make sure you have lots of people in the organisation in the same area as you, in different areas to you. Um, I'm a huge believer in having a good mentor. I've had mentors at quite critical points in my career, and they've always been really, really useful and really helped me, give me very objective messages, quite different sometimes to your manager. Yeah, and I would say take risks as well. Obviously, working in a bank, I have to say you do a risk evaluation first, but take risks. If something appeals to you, go for it. Be bold. Take the risk.
Hmm. That's a great advice. Just to follow up about networking, what's in your opinion the best way how students can utilize and use networking to benefit themselves? In what ways?
Well, you're all on LinkedIn now, so you can definitely reach out to people who are like you reached out to me, people who are at your old university, people who've posted something that interests you. Um, Look for groups who you think are associations, who you think are doing things that interest you, and reach out to them.
Hmm. Hmm. And are there any books or like maybe podcasts you would particularly recommend for our students? It might be career or non-career related, maybe some books that like motivate you or inspire you.
I think thought-provoking books are always very good, whether you agree with them or don't agree with the message. It's good to make you think. So one book which I like and I think it's quite good for for students who come from a technical or a scientific background but are looking at finance is a book called Rethinking Choices by Dr. David Cohn. And he studied physics at Cambridge, and then he did a PhD in physics. And then some years later, he took his math skills and he went into finance, and he worked in asset management.
Yeah.
And he's now given up on all of that, and he's written a book called Rethinking Choices, which is all about saving the planet.
Yeah.
And he's quite a crazy person, so he has some crazy ideas, but I think they're good to read. Another book which one of my team recommended to me is called Superintelligence: Paths, Dangers and Strategies by Nick Boston. And that's very thought-provoking in a time that we have now where people talk about artificial intelligence a lot, and is it going to take all our jobs, or is it going to take over the world because it's more intelligent than we are? And this week I started reading a book which has actually made me laugh out loud, which doesn't often happen. I was reading it on the Eurostar. I think the guy next to me thought I was mad, but it's called Careless People by a lady called Sarah Wynne Williams. And she's a New Zealand lady who studied international relations and became a diplomat in New Zealand, and saw the potential of Facebook in the early days of Facebook, the potential it had to engage in politics, to really influence world events. When maybe Mark Zuckerberg didn't really think of that himself, and she lobbied and she pushed to get a job at Facebook. So she was there in the early days and tried to get them to be more politically aware. And I'm about 20% through that book at the moment, but it's definitely my favourite book that I would recommend to everybody as well.
Thank you so much. And the last question is, what advice would you give for your younger self?
Gosh, somebody else asked me that in an interview recently. And I said, well, my younger self knew everything, so she wouldn't have taken any advice. But I think I would tell myself what I said earlier about being bold and taking risks. I think I would have done that more. I wish I'd done that more in my career. I wish I'd had more confidence in myself. When you think something and you feel something, then do it. Don't listen to other people who say, oh, that might not be a good idea. That's, you need security. Go for it. Take those risks. Do exciting things. Get out there.